Richard, welcome again to the mother of all talk shows. Your thoughts, first of all, on the melancholy news that the court found for the United States government. Were you surprised at that? And what was the basis of their finding?
Thanks for having me, George. I was connected to the court. I was attending remotely, and the whole thing lasted about 10 minutes. Lord Chief Justice Timothy Holroyd read the whole thing out in a few seconds, so casually as if it was nothing. And I was left stunned, honestly. The fact that the High Court has decided to overturn Barretso's decision and let this extradition go ahead is really astonishing. If you read the ruling that has been handed down, they refer to previous cases where the United States handed out diplomatic assurances, these same promises which they say are indestructible and bulletproof. Well, I can tell you they're not. One of the cases they refer to is David Mendoza. Assange's lawyers brought up David Mendoza's case, and they said he was also given assurances. The United States broke these assurances when they extradited him from Spain to the US in 2009. And the High Court justices apparently, as they say in the ruling, apparently they looked at Mendoza's case and found nothing wrong with it. Well, I'm very sorry, but these classified documents that I published have plenty wrong with the assurances that Mendoza was given. He was also told that he can serve the sentence given in his home country, just like they're telling Assange. He can go back to Australia and serve a sentence there. They said the same thing to Mendoza. He can go to Spain and serve a sentence there. Well, guess what? That never happened because the United States kept him there for 7 years. They denied his application 3 times, as the documents show. And they only let Mendoza go back after he sued Spain at the Spanish Supreme Court and after he sued the Department of Justice. And in Mendoza's case, he wasn't just given some vague assurance, which is also the case with Assange. He was given a contract, a very specific contract that was signed by the US, by Spain, and by himself. Assange doesn't even have that. He only has a vague assurance that if you actually read it, it doesn't really say that they won't put him in oppressive prison conditions, these special administrative measures. It says that they won't put him there unless he does something to merit the imposition of Assam, which could be anything. You know, he could pass on some innocent comment or have an innocent conversation with his lawyers or with his fiancée, and just like that, they will send him to SAMS. And they have another variety, they have a whole variety of other hellholes they can put Assange in. You know, these communication management units, special housing units, all sorts of prisons designed to isolate people and which could trigger a suicide attempt. And so I'm absolutely stunned that the High Court justices looked at Mendoza's case and found nothing wrong, and that they actually believe these assurances from the United States. I'm convinced that they have not seen these documents, because if they had seen them and they came to this judgment, I mean, they're just terribly, terribly mistaken.
And you've published these documents where, Richard?
I published them about 2 weeks ago on my Substack. So it's a very long article. It's about 7,000, 8,000 words. And these are documents from the US Department of Justice, from the US Embassy in Madrid, from the Spanish courts. And you can see very clearly the assurances that came from the US Embassy, just like they're giving assurances to Assange, right? Diplomatic assurances. In the High Court, the lead prosecutor, James Lewis, who's prosecuting Assange, he said that diplomatic assurances are solemn undertakings. He said they're not dished out like Smarties. He's right. They're not dished out like Smarties. So when they're given, we should analyze them. And I'm very sorry, but Mendoza, his assurance was absolutely vague and ambiguous. With Assange, equally vague and ambiguous. And so even if you just read them, you just take these things at face value. You just cannot trust them.
Well, they're not worth the paper in some cases that they're not written on.
Right.
For example, the Australia offer requires the Australian government to ask for Julian Assange to be sent into their prison system. If they don't ask, and Australia is now a vassal state of the United States, as it was formerly a vassal state of ours, there are many ways to persuade Australia not to ask for Julian Assange, in which case he serves the time in a US maximum security prison. It doesn't have to be the one they've given a diplomatic assurance that it won't be. It can be any number of equally atrocious maximum security prisons. So in this case, it's not worth the paper that it is written on. Vague, as you say, in the extreme. Now, the ruling, if I've read it correctly, Richard, did have some saving graces for those of us who wish to see this world historic figure free to join his family again. It accepted the medical situation of Julian Assange. It did not accept the US contention that Julian was some kind of malingerer. It accepted Judge Barrister's analysis that he would be at very severe risk of committing suicide if sent to the United States. The whole thing, it seemed to me, if I've read it correctly, turned on the assurances, which means the only thing we have to knock down now at the higher court is the assurances. Am I clasping at straws?
George, you're 120% correct. The High Court ruling did find that Assange is indeed in a precarious mental state, and then the extradition would be oppressive. The district judge the district judge Vanessa Bretzer, she didn't make a mistake. She applied Section 91 of the Extradition Act correctly, and she ruled the extradition to be oppressive because it is oppressive. Assange would kill himself if extradited, and again, I think it's tragic that the whole case is hinging on his health and assurances. It's an indictment that criminalizes journalism. We should never forget that. But you are correct. And the whole thing, the whole ruling is all about these assurances. This is why Mendoza's case is more important than ever before, because Assange's lawyers mentioned it. The judges say they looked at it and found nothing wrong, which, I mean, I'm absolutely stunned. I'm absolutely stunned. I cannot believe for one second that they actually looked at the case seriously, because these documents that I published were never seen in court. I've covered Assange's entire extradition case, and these documents were never brought up. Maybe at best they've seen the vague diplomatic assurance that was sent in January 2009, but everything else they haven't seen. And as I said, Mendoza was given a second diplomatic assurance, a contract, which is even more explicit. And now, of course, when it comes to Assange being extradited, we have to remember that, as you just correctly mentioned, they have a whole slew of other prisons they could put him in that are not ADX Florence, that are not special administrative measures, which could still lead to suicide, because what Barretzer found in her ruling is that it's the isolation, the solitude, being cut off from his family, which would trigger a suicide attempt. And the United States can achieve this in a whole variety of ways. It doesn't have to put him specifically in ADX Florence, or as we said, in special administrative measures. It has many other varieties of prisons. And you are 100% correct, George, when you say that all that needs to be knocked down now are the assurances. This is where we're at. This is the battle that needs to be fought. And the United States has a history of breaking its assurances, whether it's the Iran nuclear deal or prison transfers. It has a history of doing this. It games foreign jurisdictions. It tricks them into sending people over to the U.S. And once they're in the U.S., you can't do anything.
Exactly. Let me bowl a couple of points at you, Richard. Forgive me, I didn't get the chance to advise you of that in advance. Forgive me if you're not able to deal with it, especially as it's a very British thing. The judge is a close friend of little Alan Duncan, the runt that used to scurry around the British Foreign Office, and who played a seminal role in the handover of Julian Assange from the Ecuadorian embassy, who called Assange in Parliament a worm, which the Speaker didn't seem to find to be unparliamentary language. He still meets with Alan Duncan. Alan Duncan wrote in his book all about his friendship with the learned judge. And it turns out that the learned judge and the runt Alan Duncan lunched In advance of this hearing, of course, solemn binding promises were made that the case never came up. The biggest case in British judicial history for decades never came up over the lunch. I am taking a risk making this point, but I have no faith that the man who is best buddies since university with a minister who played such a role in getting their hands on Julian Assange should not have recused himself from the whole thing in the first place.
Now, George, I mean, who could forget Sir Alan Duncan? You know, when Assange was in the Ecuadorian embassy, there was all sorts of talk about storming the embassy. They wanted to break the Vienna Convention. They wanted to violate all sorts of international norms and storm it. I mean, this is unheard of. And the connection that you just brought up, I mean, does it surprise any of us? No, not really. If you look at the other judges that are involved in this case, you know, Lady Arbuthnot.
Arbuthnot had conflicts of interest also.
There you go. Yeah, the Henry Jackson Society. There's all sorts of red flags popping up everywhere, and this is exactly the issue. The whole system is inherently, I don't know what word to use. Corrupt. It's incorrigible. I don't know, but there's something wrong with it. There's something inherently wrong with the system that all the people who are in positions of power are criminalizing journalism, are saying that it's okay to ship people off to the United States, which has the biggest prison population on earth, which has a prison industry, which makes money off of incarcerating people. They have inhumane torture camps like Guantanamo Bay. I mean, the list is endless.
25% of all the prisoners in the world are in the United States, which has 3% of the world's population.
It's incredible. I mean, this is astronomical figures. And I bet you one thing, George, if you look at how many people are being extradited from the U.S. to other countries, you're not going to find anything.
Well, that was my next question, Rich. That was exactly my next question. We have a situation here where a young boy, poor Harry Dunn, was mowed down by a CIA officer operating covertly from a British military base, who fled the coup back to the United States with the connivance of the runt Alan Duncan's Foreign Office, and who the United States refuses to send back to face the music in a British court. What kind of extradition system is this, where not just any American, but an American official claiming diplomatic immunity to which she was not entitled can kill a young boy in Britain, and the US will not send her back here for a trial for careless driving, reckless driving, driving dangerously, not to spend 175 years in a British prison, probably not even to go to prison at all. What kind of one-sided extradition system is this?
It's absolutely disgusting, George. You know, they put this whole extradition treaty into place in 2003 under the premise that, you know, it's a mutual agreement, as a treaty should be. But it's completely one-sided. It's absolutely a one-way street. And, you know, they just want to have carte blanche. They just want to do whatever they like and pinch people from our country, from the UK, take them to the US, but they'll never send anyone from the US to the UK. I believe the CIA agent you mentioned, her name was Anne Sekulis, and as you mentioned, she was driving on the wrong side of the road, and she kills Harry Dunn. You know, a head-on collision with his motorcycle. He's dead, and then Trump refuses to extradite her back to the UK. And by the way, before she even left, as you said, the Foreign Office knew, and they let her go. They let her leave. And then Trump tries to buy off Harry Dunn's parents. He tries to buy them off after this CIA agent just recklessly killed their boy. And it's just absolutely disgusting. It really shows you how one-sided it is. Why, you know, at the same time they're trying to take Assange for publishing documents which expose crimes against humanity. It's it's not just a victimless crime. It's not a crime at all. It's a public service. It's a public good.
Sure. He should have the Nobel Prize for it. Lastly, and I'm grateful for your time, Richard, you mentioned 2003. I was there. I lobbied the then Home Secretary, David Blunkett, now Lord Blunkett, and pointed out to him that any Nelson Mandela figure in the future could be extradited, not just to the United States, but anywhere, if this kind of extradition treaty, one-sided as it is, were to go through. And he assured me, I can still see his lips moving, that on the face of the bill, on the first page, it specifically excluded extradition of political, people charged with political offenses. And I tell you something, I've never said this before because the conversation was on lobby terms, but we have now moved past that, I'm afraid. David Blunkett said to me that that was there because the Americans would never agree to extraditing, for example, Irish Republican fugitives in the United States to face trial in Britain on what would be described as political charges. Not terrorist charges, but political charges. So he conceded to me that people charged with a political offense under this treaty cannot be extradited. And yet Julian now faces charges that could not be more political. Revelations about crimes, war crimes, crimes against humanity, malfeasance in the Democratic Party, DNC, and so on. I just don't know how to make any sense of that. Has Britain entirely lost its sense of itself as an independent and sovereign country? Are we just a vassal now, like Australia once was to us?
I mean, I don't know what to say anymore that I haven't already said. I mean, I was. You know, when the extradition hearing concluded last year in October, I was standing outside the Old Bailey, and I said, you know, this is a UK court. It's in the middle of London, but the United States is holding the gavel. They are running the show from top to bottom, and it's what you've just told me. I remember David Blunkett, and what you've just told me is incredible. The extradition treaty should bar political extraditions. It should forbid these things. If I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, I think in the British implementation of it, in the Extradition Act, that clause is not present, although I could be wrong. But there, you know, it sounds so unbelievable. That's why I'm questioning myself if it's actually true. But whether it's actually there or not is really in practice making no difference, because as you just correctly pointed out, the indictment against Julian Assange is wholly, unequivocally political. And, you know, if you're going to jail Assange, you have to go after the New York Times. You have to go after everyone who profited, who you know, people who made careers off of the documents that he provided them with. The Guardian, Le Monde, Presse, all of these huge outlets published the same documents. And I don't see anyone going after them. No. I'm not saying they should. But you see a double standard here, a very clear double standard. He exposed their dirty laundry, and that's why they're going after him. It's really that simple. It's, you know, I mean, it's just disgusting. What more can I say? And anyone who looks at Assange's case and cannot understand that this is political is you know, being ignorant on purpose. I just, you know, I can't fathom people who don't understand this. The man is facing 175 years for publishing documents. Who on earth could tolerate this? Well, how do you call that justice?
Well, the New York Times, I think it was today, it may have been yesterday or the day before, had a whole page. The top half of the page was the awarding of the Nobel Prize to 3 reporters considered to have done their duty to report the truth of alleged malfeasance in various countries, the Philippines, Russia, and other predictable places. And on the bottom half of the same page of the New York Times, it covered the decision to extradite Julian Assange. You couldn't make that up, Richard.
Yeah, well, I can tell you one thing, George. You know, when we're in court covering the Assange thing, we're about 10 people, and there's no one from mainstream media. There was someone from Sky News who rolled up one day. He didn't even know the judge's name. He had to look at his cue card to find the judge's name. So, you know, they're ripping off of our reporting and then twisting it and skewing it to smear him and act like it's not political and he's a criminal, he's a hacker, everything to take away from his achievements because they're jealous. They hate that he has actually done what they all pretend to do, which is hold governments accountable, which is to advocate transparency and really publish documents that make a difference, that hold those who commit war crimes accountable. They've never done these things, and that's why they hate Assange, and they always try to paint him as a criminal and take away, to chip away at his accomplishments and achievements. That's all it is.
So it's not over until it's over. What happens next, Richard?
So Stella Morris, who is Assange's partner, but she's also on the legal team, she said that they'll be appealing this. Assange's lawyers will be appealing this decision to the Supreme Court. They have 14 days to do that, and that's what they plan to do next. Honestly, these documents, if the judges haven't seen them, they have to see them, because what they wrote in their ruling is it's just wrong. It's just absolutely wrong. I have the assurance here from the U.S. Embassy in Madrid to Mendoza. I think this is the only thing that they have seen. They haven't seen the other assurances that he was given, and the United States broke, unequivocally broke. So the conclusion they came to is absolutely wrong. I'm sorry. The United States has a past of breaking assurances. This is a fact. It's not my opinion. The documents are crystal clear, and the judges need to correct this. The higher court needs to correct this.
Richard, you're a bright star. Thanks for shining light on this story for us this evening. Richard Medhurst